Hatep, Uncle Chisaneb, peace to all the family. This is your brother Khepra Ptah. Today we're going to do a subject called Amun Ra and the Sacred Breath by none other than myself, Khepra Ptah Djehuti Amn. So I'd first of all like to greet each and every one of you with Uncle Chisaneb, life, strength, and health. So why is the breath of Amun Ra so important? Well, let's start off with this. We're all expressions of what has arisen from the primordial ocean of nothingness, the noon, eons ago. The result of the explosion, expansion of light and radiation. So we, along with everything else around us that has a form, are crystallizations of stardust and light slowed down. So this is a process believed to have taken eons, and yet the process of expansion, aka creation, was a decree of divine intelligence. An intelligence with an urge to experience and express itself. But first, it has to start off at a point without a location. How it has no outer expression is because it's in a subjective realm in the beginning. It has to create something that gives it a reference. Hence, it creates a reference point and splits in two. This has started a movement. It has emerged from a subjective state to an objective state. Hence, it begins to expand more and more, expressing itself and adapting. It brings itself into being. It brings a universe into being that is forever shifting, expanding, and contracting. So we live in a universe that expands and contracts like an out breath and an in breath. It goes through constant transformation. The universe expands, contracts, and transforms like all living beings do. The process has developed in the way where energy slows down, crystallizes, and then speeds up. It sublimates, it becomes more subtle. Basically, all things solid is light slowed down, yet moves through space, giving rise to this process we call time. So, time is the movement of light through space, and all physical things is composed of energy. And the density energy, the more solid it appears. So, Amun is the unseen intelligence that holds the universe together as well as work as the hidden force that stabilizes the universe. So the stabilization is the establishment of what we call Ma'at. Ra is the light that is expressed as the sun, but also light itself. Ra exists within plants and animals, and Ra is the life force and the life essence within all living beings. So we also have the aspects of existence that things come about based on the very thoughts of the thinker itself. The thoughts create and shape our world. We call this entity Temu, or the nectar Temu, the thinker. Thus, we begin to realize that there is a universal mind. And as it says in Hermetic literature, that the all is mind and the universe is mental. So, this is the first Hermetic principle that they call mentalism. The fifth Hermetic principle is called rhythm. So, our universe has aspects that are linear and cyclic, as well as expansive. So, the rhythm of our universe is pervaded by movement that circulates with contractions to complement its expansions. The same can be said about the circulatory system within each and every one of us and all living, breathing animals. So, our personal energy field, the human breath, they go hand in hand. So, in fact, this is similar with all living entities, including the plant kingdom. So, by the way, we speak of plants. We examine the Kemetic temple walls. You will see pictograms of a tree superimposed upon the body of Osar, aka Osiris. The tree represents the human nervous system. The ancients depicted the nervous system as a tree throughout the world. And now you may notice that Osar is depicted as green often on the wall of these ancient Kemetic temples and so forth. The form he represents is growth. So if you look into the Gnostic teachings as well as the alchemical works, even in the European literature, which eventually inherited the knowledge that came from Kemet and circulated throughout Europe during the European Renaissance and so forth, you'll see that there is the tree where Adam on one side and Eve is on the other. This is symbolic of the feminine lunar Ida and the masculine solar Pingala, the energy currents that travel up the central spinal column called the Sushumna. Hence, so you have the Ida, which activates the right side of the brain, and the Pingala, which activates the left side of the brain. The universe itself moves in a shape like a spiral, and this is due to its movement. So when you breathe, there's an energy within you that spirals downward as you take the in breath and outward. So when you're taking the out breath, it spirals up and out. And you may have heard the saying, when you're down and out, the best place to go is in and up. So the spiral in the spirit contains the same word, right? To spire. When something expires, it's like it runs out of the breath of life. In other words, it dies. So the fact that the word spirit comes from the Latin word spiritus, it means breath. So it indicates that being able to connect with your spirit has something to do with being able to tap into the very breath of life itself, the breath of creation and the breath of existence. So when we're breathing deeply and correctly, it places us as individuals into a state of relaxation. And when you're relaxed, this opens a way for your body to actually heal as your personal energy field expands due to a higher level of consciousness. So when you're in a place of expansion, you begin to have more influence over your environment. And when you're tense, anxious, and nervous, full of anger and sadness, your energy field around you, your auric field actually, literally begins to contract, opening up the ways for disease and making you vulnerable for all kinds of negative thought forms and psychic attacks and so forth. Anger is always a secondary emotion and is also based on a survival mechanism. So it can at first be used after you get out of situations that you may not want to be in, fight or flight and so forth. But it's not something that you want to remain in. Okay. So you don't want to stay in that aspect of anger because it can lead to liver problems, ulcers, and everything else, including aneurysms. And a study was done at a particular university where it showed that when a person is in stress, their DNA literally contracts. But when you experience joy, happiness, and so forth, the DNA expands. So whenever you get a chance, I believe it's called heart math. So take a look at that if you can. Just look it up, research about the expansion of DNA, how DNA expands and contracts due to emotion. So the Yoruba, they speak of this idea of expansion as ire. So when someone goes to a priest and they may have cast with the dilogun, what they call the cowrie shells, or the opele, which is the sacred chain used by Babala and so forth, they determine if a person is in a state of good health or if they're in line with their destiny. That's called ire. They're in a state of expansion as opposed to a state of stagnation, right? When you have the opposite. Hold on one second. Okay, so the name of the Kemetic deity Amun Ra has different meanings and connotations. In the Kemetic conscious community, he's known for having many different functions. You know, a lot of times people see Amun Ra as a transcendental being, or they may see Amun Ra as representing that hidden aspect of us or the hidden light and so forth. But the Kemetic deity Amun Ra, when we examine the meaning of the name, it has a lot of interesting connotations. So it is a reference to the sun in Aries in the age of the Ram, 2200 to 100 BC. When we study the works of Egyptologists, we'll see that they agree that around the time of the 18th dynasty, that's 1550 to 1298 BC, the priesthood of Amun Ra had amassed great wealth and power. Unfortunately, there was conflict between the priest of Amun Ra and the followers of Akhenaten. And of course, you know, that happens whenever there's great changes taking place and so forth. Whenever there's a shifting of an age, there's going to be conflict. However, we want to look at the symbolism of Amun Ra and what the various Netzers represented. I don't want to get caught up in beefs that the ancestors may had because of the changes that were taking place and so forth. Now, the solar disk brought forth as the object of reverence by Akhenaten represented an aspect of expansion where there was unks delivered to the living because he saw the solar disk representing like the sun, but it also was supposed to embody all the powers of the various Neteru. So some may argue that he may have got people away from the focus of the different forms of the Neteru and consolidated them all in the Aten. Now, this is basically determined on whether or not you want to practice that form or meditate on that. A lot of people that are doing with different aspects of Kemet and trying to bring Kemet back, you know, my opinion is that the energy and the knowledge never really went away. It just took different forms. Anyway, Ra is the spirit of the sun, and so is Aten. We also see the name Ra hidden in Ram. A lot of times Amun-Ra was ram-headed. And we also see where Aries is dealing with the ram. We see that the ram represents great power and is the symbol for the Ba, or the soul, an animal who is not headstrong, or not only headstrong, should I say, but has the power in the head, right here. And they say that Aries rules the head. So not to mention that you see the word Ra in ram, you take the word ram, you spell it backwards, and you get Mars, which is the planet that rules Aries. Now, Mars and Aries happen to be the same entity who in the Romans and Greeks they considered the god of war. So in variations, you'll see where Amun is also and sometimes identified with Jupiter, identified as Zeus, and so forth. These are all aspects representing authority. Sometimes they show Zeus being a being who carries a lightning bolt and strikes his enemies down and so forth. Remember, the idea of worship of the deities and all that, according to Herodotus, the Greeks took that knowledge, or should I say, they got that knowledge from the Cometians. The Cometians turned them or taught them how to pay homage to the Neteru, or should we say, who we now call gods. They were not so much as people might say gods and goddesses, as much as they were universal intelligences and principles and forces of nature in which you can connect with, that not only can you connect with, communicate with, but also invoke. In other words, you can cause these very forces to arise within your own being through various chants and rituals and so forth. So anyway, we see where either way, Amun or Amin was considered to be, in some cases, the head of the Neteru or the king of the Neteru. So it's important to understand the fluidity of the characteristics and the identification of the various deities in those ancient times. Throughout the ages, different deities were identified with different planets. So there's going to be more on this in a later presentation. But one example is such as the fluidity is with Tahuti. Some people call it Thoth. In some aspects, we see that Tahuti is the lunar deity, right? And then there's other aspects where we see Tahuti identified with Hermes, and Hermes seemed to be more linked to Mercury and so forth. So these deities were fluid. According to the ages, there was different ages where the deities were seen to do different things. You see where they tear temples down in one place and rebuild them in another place. Because it's like them using the energy and utilizing the energy, but every place a temple was set in the land was like the circuitry of a giant motherboard. So when you take one temple down and replace it with another object, or you may move a temple to another place, what you're doing is that you're bringing forth the circulation of another type of energy because you're trying to get the energy to do a certain thing and maintenance of the kingdom, the civilization, and society. And that was what they called the establishment of Ma'at, because you wanted to get things to be established on earth as it was in so-called heaven, or in the heavens, or should we say in the outer cosmos. So this is due to shifts in the planetary arrangements, right, and the times, because the ancient Cometians, they really were good at keeping times. So every so many years, they make sure that certain temples were moved. It could be a century from now, and they say, okay, they may divine on this particular structure. Say, does this structure still need to be here? And they will move it if it had to be moved. That's how it worked. Of course, you see the Great Pyramids over there in the Giza Plateau was meant to stay there forever. They weren't meant to be moved because they had a very specific role and something we'll talk about later. So we benefit greatly having a relationship where we tap into the netter or the gods within ourselves, or should we say the divine intuitive faculty that gives us the ability to receive messages from the ancestors and the Neteru themselves. Each and every one of us have a pineal gland. Each and every one of us have an innate spirituality, which allows you to communicate with the forces of nature. You can communicate with the universe. If you speak anything outward into the universe will respond because you and the universe itself are not separate. It only appears that you are. Now, we're all part of a greater whole. Each and every one of us have our own individuality because we are different expressions of nectar or the divine, giving the divine a function within ourselves where we can go through our own unique set of experiences and ultimately give the supreme being an experience through us. So just for the sake of history, I'd also like to point out, there was a time when there was a merger of the Greek and the Kemetic culture, and this was due with the result of the rise of the general Ptolemy Soter, who took control of Kemet after the death of Alexander the Macedonian. Ptolemy the First Soter took on the name Meriamun Setenre, or Setepenre. So let me see. Mary Amen Setepenre. That was his name. Mary Amen Setepenre. So anyway, it was he who declared himself pharaoh and founded the Ptolemaic dynasty from around 304 BC, and that was ending with the death of Cleopatra around 30 BC. Peace and love, family. So this is what will set the tone for the later establishment of what would become the Christian religion as a political power for the Roman Empire. Again, this is later in time. Today, when you look at some of the surviving systems that are in West Africa and so forth, like for instance, the pantheon of the Yorubas, they have a list of deities called the Orishas. And as we can see, you can't just place one particular deity on one particular sphere and cover all the attributes of that particular deity because they have what you call roles in the diaspora and may have many variations and degrees of importance depending on where you are in Africa. Like, for instance, there's different forms of Eshu Alekba, the divine trickster, a being that is connected to the air element, by the way. Once again, you have the air. There's also beings like Oya, which deals with the sacred breath. And those who are devotees of Oya are encouraged not to smoke so that you don't ruin your lungs. But again, we see that there's a connection to the sacred breath and Oya being connected with the cultivation of psychic energy and being able to communicate with the ancestors and so forth and having a relationship with them. So it's all connected, and it goes back as seeing that there's a connection with breath and spirit, because your spirit is considered to be the breath of the supreme being. It talks about how Lodumare placed the Emi within the clay figures created by Obatala and therefore brought human beings to life. Once again, you might recognize this story. In the Commission tradition, it talks about Kenemu also placing and creating human beings and spinning them on the potter's wheel out of clay. You keep on hearing this reference to clay and the clay being brought to life. Or the ankh being put up to the nostrils of the clay figures, activating the clay figures, or therefore bringing in the spirit and the ba into every spirit, every entity. There's this ba and there's the ka, which is this double. So we're going to talk about the spirit double a little bit later. But interesting is you get this note of the mercurial deities who are often seen as tricksters and are related to the air because the air is also related to your thoughts. So you can change your thought process by breathing in a different way. A lot of times it's the fluctuations of thoughts that can actually get us off center, which is why it's good to learn how to be relaxed and breathe so you can calm those thoughts down. So when we analyze the Medu Neter, also known as hieroglyphic arrangements of the name Amun-Ra, we see there's a sonnet board and a reed leaf. The the reed leaf represents the wind element, and then the sonnet board, which is the board game similar to backgammon, represents the soul being directed through the Duat, or the story region and astral plane. There is the water wave, also representing the energy of creation itself. This would suggest that Amen is the unseen force that directs creation itself. Ra has the determinative that is a dot within a circle, implying an aspect of expansion, and a glyph that spells Ra is a mouth and an arm. The arm representing the divine cubit, and the mouth is that which speaks and commands creation itself. Each and every one of us being made in the image and likeness of the Creator also have been blessed with these abilities to speak and bring things into manifestation. Hence, I reintroduce or bring back the concept of the triple Hesi. So, in the Hech Hemanub, that is the temple of the white and gold lotus, Amun-Ra was the main deity, and that's what I was trained to work with at first. In fact, it is the Kara Amun-Ra, the shrine of Amun-Ra, where the ancestor Hedi Khafra did the great work, and it still survives. And I also have his book called The Pyramid Matrix. So, for those who are interested in getting a copy of that, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. I just recovered after months of searching for it, and I'm so glad to have it back. Anyway, what he would teach is how to summon the forces with the Hesi, and that is the sounds of power and the utilization of the sacred breath. If you put yourself in a relaxed state and you go into trance, you can oppress the things upon your life force that you want to see manifest in your life. The method is where one summons Amun-Ra and takes on the energy of Amun-Ra and becomes Amun-Ra. And this is through the triple Hesi as instructed. So I'm going to go over this again. Anechara Amun-Ra Nutatina Amin Ra, Anuka Amin Ra. A lot of times when we go into trance chanting Amin Ra, we would have like a system and something to put you in a trance. So we'll say Anetarak Amin Ra, Nutatina Amin Ra, Anuka Amin Ra, Anetarak Amin Ra, Nutatina Amin Ra, Anuka Amin Ra. Anetarak Amin Ra, Nutatina Amin Ra, Anuka Amin Ra. Amin Ra 108 times. So you might can get yourself some beads. I don't have my mala beads with me or some Rudrasha beads, and you'll chant 108 times, and then you'll chant in silence, and you will correspond that chant with the sacred breath. So as you're breathing in mentally, you're saying Anecharaka Mara, Nutatira Mara, Anuka Mara. Then you hold it. Anecharaka Mara, Nutatira Mara, Anuka Mara. And as you're breathing out, you're mentally saying Anecharaka Mara, Nutatira Mara, Anuka Mara. Then you hold it again. Anecharaka Mara, Nutatira Mara, Anuka Mara. So you're doing this a total of 4 cycles, or should I say a cycle is 4 times with the out breath, hold, in breath, actually the in breath, hold, out breath, then hold. And you want to chant Anecharaka Mara, Nutatira Mara, Anuka Mara. Because one of the ways that you get into this place of relaxation, when you get into this place of relaxation, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in that place where you're susceptible to go into trance. When you're able to go into trance, you can impress upon your life force the things that you want to see happen in your life by visualizing these things and also bringing it down to earth. Hatapu. Akbato, Aburubuya Bushiste, Abato, Soriwario Fun. Ashe. So I learned how to chant this 108 times in the morning and as well as when you wake up. This will energetically set the presiding energy of the day. It is also good if you were to go out in nature and do this sacred Hesi because you want to be around the negative ions. It's good to get out of the city. It's good to be in places where you can take in the negative ions because the positive ions is what keeps you tired. Okay? So go out where there's negative ions, go where there's the mountains, go where there's the trees, go where there's the force of the nature, where you can actually have a personal connection with the Netaru or the Orishas, as they are, or the Loas. They're out in nature, okay? So it's good to get out of the house and go out in nature. So I'm not revealing any secrets and none of that. I'm just telling you to go out in nature and connect with these forces because that is how you have a relationship with them. Of course, there's initiations in the various systems, but you can go out into the forest and have a connection with the spirit of the forest. They call it forest bathing. And when you forest bathe, what you're doing is that you're taking in the energies and you're letting the purifying energies of the trees literally clean off your aura. So go into a forested area, sit, breathe, take in the energy of the forest. Go on top of a mountain, sit, breathe, take in the energies of the mountain, and so forth. This is how the ancestors were able to connect with nature because they'll go out and connect with nature. We've been in these cities, and I'm not saying that the cities, everybody should just pack up and get out now and everything else. But I am saying it's good to leave the cities for a while and go out where there's nature because when you get a connection with nature, you're going to discover something beautiful, and that is nature starts to teach you. You begin to learn from nature, and you begin to learn from nature how to actually interact with the various spirits and the ambassadors of the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, and so forth, right? Including having a better relationship with people, because believe it or not, we're still aspects of nature ourselves. It's just that we have forgotten because society and everything else has told us that you have to work a 9 to 5 and everything, but it does not tell you how to connect necessarily back to nature. So, in various indigenous practices worldwide, you'll see that the breath is often utilized to begin a prayer. So, I talked about this a while ago. We talked about the breath and how we do this breath work before you do every major prayer, which can also empower the ritual itself. But the goal is to harmonize the subconscious and the conscious and the superconscious minds. In today's world, we see that there's a lot of anxiety and people are mentally scattered, foggy headed. We see this due to a lack of oxygen reaching the brain, and it is the breath that gives us life. Amen is the breath of life and creation. So it is by tapping into the world of the unseen that brings harmony to the world around us. The world that we see with our eyes, just as the breath, oxygen is invisible, so is the all pervading intelligence that we know in the Kemetic tradition as Wa Neter or Wa Nter. So it is through the breath in which we unify the upper and lower, the inner and the outer. And when you look at the ancient symbolism of the Samai Tawi, sometimes you see Haru on one side, Set on the other side, and they seem to be pulling a rope with the Sema, which represents the lungs and trachea, bringing stability to both lands. Why is that? Because it's the sacred breath of life that maintains your connection with the higher realms and the lower realms, the objective realms and the subjective realms, as above so below, as within so without. So the unification of our innerverse and outerverse brings the harmony of our universe. So just as life manifests from the primordial ocean of nothingness, it is back to the primordial ocean of nothingness that we all must go. Hence the breath, the in breath, and the out breath of existence itself. But there is no death. There is only the circulations of energy. You cannot die, only transform. Hence, Ra goes the constant transformation, even to fight off a pep or apophis, whatever you may want to call him. So the raising of the jet pillar is something that a lot of people talk about these days who are in various Kemetic circles, who talk about the spinal column and so forth. It is the one who has the straight backbone, along with the correct breathing, in which you have the healthy circulation of life force energy. The human body is a network of nerves that carry instructions from the brain, as well as electrical charges. So the importance is when you're breathing correctly and when you're relaxed, right? If you could put yourself in that stage of relaxation, even amidst the chaos, this is when you can get your auric field to expand because we live in a very hectic world a lot of times. And I know it doesn't seem like you want to stop and just take a breath, but at times you do want to do just that, stop and take a breath or go out where you can breathe because without breath, there's no life. So this is good for prayer, it's good for meditation. We have talked about the Ha breath. I want to go into more detail about that. Um, in a book of Coming Forth by Day, aka the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I hate calling it because it wasn't called that. And then there's the coffin text and the pyramid text. We see that the ancients put a lot of emphasis on breathing. And we also see that the sacred breath is identified with the Ankh, mistaken for an Egyptian cross. But this symbol is known as the key of life. And I call it the key to experience the phenomena of being. Why? Because there are many depictions and Commission pictograms showing where the Het Haru, Ha Thor, Het Haru, Ha Thor, Ha, has a place where the key of life is up to the lips of the deceased. The breath is restored to those in the afterlife with the sacred breath of life. So in the book of Knowing the Creations of Ra, we are told that the Creator sneezed and spat out snoot. By the way, for those who contain anger, and you want that anger to not become stagnant in your body, hold please, let this ambulance go by. If you don't want that anger to become stagnant in your body and create problems for your liver because anger is stored in the liver, then what you will do is that you'll chant, shoo. You can do it as many times as shoo, 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 shoo. And you can focus on the color green and see that, and you can massage your liver. Sometimes you can take some castor oil and massage your liver in a clockwise motion and chant shoo. Because when you get the anger out of your body, right, it allows for that stagnant energy to go and for you to be more centered and focused. Because sometimes we have hidden anger in our bodies. Now, I said in a Facebook post that anger is of a higher vibration than apathy. And this is true because if you're staying in apathy, you're basically in stagnant waters. But I don't mean that you're supposed to stay in anger. But let that, if you're angry at a certain situation, maybe that is telling you that it's time for you to take flight and get more in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? Because at a higher vibration, you got what is called neutrality, which is vibrates at 250, which means that there's a difference between neutrality and apathy. Neutrality is when you say, I can choose to participate or not. I don't have to be a part of this long sermon that they're having on the news that's telling me that I need to march in the street and destroy everything in my neighborhood. Or you can be apathetic and be like, I don't care about nothing because nothing goes right for me. So I'm just going to continue to work at this stagnant job, right? And this is not a judgment, but this is telling you that these are stages, okay? So emotions, a lot of times, what you're feeling constantly represents the frequency and the energy in which you're vibrating on. So back to knowing the creations of Ra, we see that the Creator came out and sneezed out Tefnut, or sneezed Shu and spit out Tefnut. And you want to know something funny? In a lot of West African practices, when you're taking a libation, you're spraying the ashe and everything else. It's almost what they're seeing Ra did when Ra brought creation into being and established Ma'at as the foundation. You see, so you might could say that Shu and Tefnut was kind of like Ra spitting out his ashe into the realm. Shu, Tefnut. He sneezed and he spat. Shu. You see what I mean? The tef is the spit. So when you drink that water, do that libation, and do that prayer, what do? You spit. That's one of the ways that you can do it. So in the book of creations of Ra, we're talking about creation of heat and moisture, the yin and yang principle bringing creation into being. We reenact that ritual even in today's West African ceremonies. That's right. So we're seeing the creation is brought forth with what is called the yin and yang principle. That is the fiery principle and the watery principle. When you bring the two together, you get vapor, which sublimates and rises up like spirit. So the ancient ones also attributed this to the ability to speak and call things into existence. So when I spoke, some years ago to an Hawaiian shaman, revealed to me that there was an African connection to Hawaiian Huna tradition. And I talked about how the Hawaiians would refer to the whites as haole because they said that when they would pray, they didn't show any signs of having any breath because they wouldn't breathe with their prayers. But it was customary for them, the Hawaiians, to actually use breath when they pray. So this is because when the whites first arrived, they were basically coming on for the path of trying to convert, right? Just because you pray, you can do a whole bunch of rituals, but may not be connecting necessarily with spirit. Okay, so when you go to deeper levels of trance and so forth, then you put yourself in that state, and your heart is based on bringing forth an objective. You put yourself in that state, and then you can manifest and achieve the things in which you want to see. Water is also said to have a cooling effect on creation itself, right? Because everything starts off as fiery, then cools down and solidifies. So what you're saying when you're spraying that water and you're doing your libations is that you have this hot thought, you have this undifferentiated energy, and you want to slow it down and cool it off and get it to manifest. That's why you want to have a cool head. More about this later. So anyway, breath is necessary not only to regulate the human voice, but also to produce sound itself. So the ancients, including the Hawaiians I just talked about, they utilized the ha breath whenever there was time to pray and invoke the spiritual forces during their rituals. And I had also discovered in my practice of dealing with Ifa that when you take what they call the opoele, we take our divining chains and you breathe on every segment of the chain before I throw it. And so go, then I toss. That's how I was taught. But at the same time, you do that with the prayers that you start out with in some traditions, or even in Kabbalah or Kabbalistic mysticism, the breath is utilized. So I notice when it deals with the mystical traditions, they all utilize the breath. When I studied Sufism, I discovered that they utilize the sacred breath. So when you utilize the sacred breath, you can put yourself in that state and bring things into manifestation and breathe life into your intentions because breath is life. So even in Chinese medicine, the ha breath, they say, or ha, that connects with the heart, right? So you want to make the heart connection. If you feel like the energy in your heart is stagnant, if you have a whole lot of fear and anxiety and lack of courage, that could be a heart issue. You're feeling hatred and you can't feel any love. There's a heart issue. So you chant ha and do the ha breath. You see, you can focus on the color red and so forth. Now, interesting enough, in Ifa tradition or the Risha tradition, the heart is connected to Ogun. And Ogun is always busy, always pumping, right? And a lot of people don't understand that Ogun also deals with the emotions and the ability to remove obstacles. Ogun chops down all the shrubs in your way so that you can get through. Ogun also helps remove psychic blockages. So, anyway, getting back to the heart is when you chant and you say, you're opening up this energy field of the heart. Because when you open up the heart energy, right, you will be able to feel people's energy around you. When you open up this field, this center right here, you'll get in front of people and you'll feel their vibes. Brothers, I'm going to share something with you. When you talk to a woman, don't be all like this. Center yourself and have a heart-to-heart connection. When you're talking to people, have a heart-to-heart connection. Open up. Brother says also, Obaluaye, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Lord of the earth. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know, that's one thing too. It's always good to learn and have that connection with the earth. The breath is good to also help with disease and illness. A lot of times, a lack of breath keeps us from being able to connect with our bodies, and it makes us susceptible to illness, sickness, diseases. So it's good for us to connect with the breath of the forest and the breath of the earth. It's good for us to sometimes learn how to put our feet in the dirt. In some traditions, we talk about feeding the earth itself so that we may be healthy. So it's good for us to connect with the dirt, connect with the earth, get in a place where you can have that natural connection and continue to utilize the breath. Because, like I said earlier, this is how you connect with the Netaru. Thank you for that. In many indigenous cultures, too, the number 4 is the sacred number. It represents the 4 elements in the 4 directions. So, whenever the ancients would begin with a prayer, they would sit with their back straight. So, when you chant the word, you make that light sound in the form of the breath, and you take a full drawing in. Then you breathe in, you breathe. You want to extend this breath out. Do it 4 times. And do that before you do your prayers or your meditation. And just see how you feel. Try that. So it's believed that whenever the breath is utilized for the divine purpose, it produces what is called in the Polynesian tradition, mana. This is equivalent to what we call ashe, chi, prana, and so forth. In the case of the Cometian science, it is called tir nature, which this tir nature or this divine energy makes it so that you can develop what is called heka, the ability to make things manifest, or that is the power of spirit, heka. So, not to mention, there's the such thing as the Huna tradition. It talks about the human constitution consisting of the high self, lower self, and middle self. As I talked about earlier, you have the Ori, you have Orienu, which you can access through the belly button, and then you also have Akan, which is the heart. You have these same centers throughout the planet, even in Chinese medicine, but they call that the triple burner. You got the triple warner. You got the energy here, you got the energy here, and you got the energy at your by your belly button. And I access these energies because you want these energy centers to align. Because if your head is burning up and your stomach is cold, it means that your central core is out of alignment. So the high self corresponds to what is called your super consciousness. This makes the connection to what we call in that tradition Amakuwa, which is the guardian mother, father spirit that connects you to the ancestral field, right? In some traditions, this is called the oversoul, Paramatman. We look in Africa, they talk about in West African tradition, you have your aspect of you in heaven. We call that the Aponri. You want to make sure that you're aligned with that. that you're connected with that. Because when you're connected with that, that means that you are able to manifest the things that you want and be aligned with your destiny. And one of the reasons why people are sick, ill, and they're unhappy and they feel like their soul has been crushed is because they're not in alignment with their destiny. So the ancients made sure that you would always do divination at the birth of the child and see what that child's life is going to turn out like. And this child will be cultivated and will be sent in a direction where this person will be able to experience the things that they're supposed to experience, but they were told of what their destiny is. This is how it was in ancient traditions. Nowadays, a lot of people are unaware of what their destiny is, and they might be successful working at a job like McDonald's and so forth, but they're not fulfilled. And I'm not saying that some people's job is maybe to work at McDonald's. But if it's not your job, you can build your ladder on the wrong house and climb on the wrong roof. In other words, you will be successful doing something, but you're not fulfilled. You'll know when you're in alignment with your destiny because you will discover that you have access to more energy. There's no inner resistance. See, so we talk about the oversoul. We talk about the Ba in a Kemetic tradition, not to be confused with the Ka. You see, when you know the names of your ancestors, you can call upon them. We call that the Ren. You call upon the Renu of your ancestors, and then you put out food because you feed the Ka. Now, the Ba can actually go on, but the Ka can stay behind and still do the work of the person as if they're still here. Because if you neglect to feed the Ka and don't call on the name of that person, what happens is that the Ka will eventually dissipate. But consciousness and spirit itself, consciousness, real consciousness cannot be destroyed. So there's no beginning and there's no end. So it's through meditation techniques, breathing methods that gives us access to the energy that builds up the ashe, the ten, the chair, the prana, the mana, the chi, the universal life force energy, and gives you the power to command the cosmic forces. And it's beneficial to start our prayers and rituals off with the sacred breath. Like for instance, one example was the ha breath that I talked about. And also, there's prayers in any tradition where you can basically break these prayers down. Like for instance, you can talk to yourself in a prayer, speak in third person. You can go into a trance. You can sing the prayers. Learn how to hit those notes because when you sing, it's also causing shifts within your energy field. That's something that they say people who are soulful can do. Now, it doesn't mean that every person has to be a singer. Some people are dancers. But whenever you do something, put your heart into it because prayer is connected to a feeling. So when you're feeling, that means that you're bringing that manifestation closer into being. So you want to make this prayer a physical process, feel the prayer and feel the outcome, you see. So I'd encourage you also to write your prayer down and say it 3 times after you have done the sacred breath. You say the prayer 3 times because what you're doing is that you're getting it to manifest. You're using the 3. The universe starts off at the point, then it creates a line. Now you got 2 points. Then it creates a third, right? Dot. Third point, you got 3 lines, 3 angles, 3 points. Now you got the triple trinity. That is when manifestation comes into being. So the first recital will be your middle self. The second recital will be your lower self. And the third recital will be your high self. The part of you that is seen, Ra. The part of you that opens the connection between heaven and earth is Ptah. Amen, Ra, Ptah. You see, each and every one of us are a trinity of deities working in unison. The deities work through us, and the deities that they're talking about in Kemet work as universal functions. So when you have blockages in a personal level, in your personal energy field, you have to get those blockages undone by realigning yourself with the functions of the universe and being in harmony with nature, Ma'at. Our physical bodies being composed of matter is held together with 14,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. And that's amazing. And amazingly enough, our bodies are composed of atoms full of energy, space, empty space to be exact. And this is between every atom. It's amazing. So in essence, we are luminous beings. Each, every one of us have an aura. And if your aura is luminous, you'll become more attractive, not only to other people, but also other beings on a more subtle level of existence. And these beings, what we call guides, angels, elevated ancestors, They will help you if you're connected. They see you and they connect with you. It's the activation of what is called the light body or the coup, which is activated when you get into that state of relaxation and inner peace. But you have to remove that energy, that stagnant energy, which keeps you from being seen and connecting with the higher forces in the universe. So it is through the breath that we awaken, which we call that incorruptible body, which is the Sahu. This is the purification of self and the activation of your light body, which renders us as individuals awakening and evolving into divine beings. So when the heart is purified, it becomes as light as the ostrich feather. Whenever a person has a heart full of impurities that is heavy, we call that a heavy heart. So when you look at the British Museum, there is a papyrus from Kemet, which is the judgment scene of Hunefer. Well-known papyrus. You see it all over the place, at least copies of it anyway. So they show him standing next to the jackal-headed Anbu, who many know as Anubis. There before the scales of Ma'at, Apuwat observes the beam and reports the position of the scales to Tahuti, who writes his name in a scroll of life. Then gives Hunefer the right to go before Asar. And the result of his good deeds and being true of voice, and he will be able to join the ancestors in immortality and become an Asar being himself. But if he is found unworthy, his heart will be given to Amit, who is the soul eater, if he is denied immortality. So this is from what is called the chapter of coming forth by day from night. You know, and there's been a lot of different religions or different forms of Abrahamic faith and everything else that is borrowed and drank from the spring of the Nile Valley. We'll talk about that later because a lot of people say that the Ptah Heru or the Egyptian Book of the Dead is where they get the Bible from. And I think the Bible is a composite of many different things. You see, but I can see why they say that because there's a scene where they talk about the serpent's legs being removed and everything else, and the serpent being forced to crawl on his belly. That's in the Ptah Heru. But remember, not every Egyptian Book of the Dead or Ptah Heru is alike because different officials they had it arranged differently according to what divination took place before it was divine or when it was divine for them, so they could be helped to transition into the afterlife. So anyway, the symbol known as Nefer. A lot of people will see this symbol. It looks like it looks like a lute, like a stringed instrument, but it also represents the lungs and trachea. It is true that the lungs and trachea, not only do we breathe also, but we use that to make musical notes, aka the sound vibrations. So in ancient Egyptian or Cometian tradition, it teaches us that Ptah, or in some cases Atum, created the heavens and earth through divine utterance. So our universe is held together with light and sound. Remember, everything around you that is solid consists of light slowed down. Nefer is beauty and harmony. So many of you may have heard of Nefertiti, which I believe means that she who is twice beautiful. But Nefer also means divine harmony. And you can see where Nefer is connected with the breath. Nefer is connected with the lungs and trachea. So when you're in harmony through the breath, you're in a state of Nefer, a state of harmony and beauty. In order for the breath to be sufficient, there has to be balance in the body. So you have the breath in circulation. Blockages must be clear so that the life force energy can electrify and oxygenate the blood. So once the blood has been oxygenated, it will be able to perform better when it circulates throughout the brain. And this is why it's important to breathe from the diaphragm as well as do what we call alternative nostril breathing. We'll talk about that soon. But when you're breathing in, you make your stomach come out. You're breathing in through the nose. Do not breathe into the mouth during your meditations. Breathe in through the nose so you get the energy to circulate and oxygenate your brain and circulate properly. Okay? So you sit still, back straight, breathing into the nose. Now you can breathe out the mouth, but you don't breathe into the mouth. Okay? And you'll notice even that looking at people that breathe into the nose, breathe into the mouth, they kind of look lost, right? So you want to breathe into the nose and oxygenate your body, oxygenate your mind and your brain and so forth. So you be able to think and function better throughout your life and throughout the day and so forth. So it's important to breathe from the lower diaphragm. Don't just breathe from here. Do not breathe from the chest all day because what will happen is that you'll find yourself full of anxiety, and that's not what you want. Anxiety and all that will start to create cortisol in your body, and your body will start breaking down after a while. You don't want to have an overabundance of cortisol. You want to make sure that there's a balance in there. So When you learn how to perfect alternative nostril breathing so that both hemispheres of the brain and both sides of the body are activated, the body is be popularly known as having the 7 power centers in some traditions. Um, there's the 3 lower power centers, there's the heart center, and there's the 3 higher chakras or power centers. The goal is to establish a balance between the higher and the lower power centers. This circulates or this corresponds with the middle self, the lower self, and the higher self, according to ancient traditions. So when you have the full activation of the light body, also known as the Ku or the divine intelligence, feeding off the Shechem. If you read the Purdom Heruim Ger, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it says that the Kus feed off the heavenly Shechem, which means that the Ku is feeding off the vital energies of the universe. Your light body is feeding off of vital energy. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a brother, Ralph Smart. He used to say, all right, it's time to breathe in some of that good ass prana, baby. So, yeah, you want to breathe in that good ass prana. You want to breathe in that life force energy. So, that's why I said earlier, it's good to get out in nature and breathe when there's the negative ions. So when you have the full activation of the light body known as the Ku, you'll be making the body not only be more harmonious, but it become more luminous. And people will be able to look at you and they will see like a glow. Okay. The body awakening, we talk about the incorruptible self, the incorruptible aspect of self. We call that the Sahu. So it's the frequency of a number of breaths that you're utilized per minute. Some would say that you want to breathe less than 18 breaths a minute and you want to slow down the breath and get into that state of relaxation. And if you do it long enough, what you'll discover when you get into trance, it appears that you're not breathing after a while. And what's happening is that you're just breathing super slow. But when you get to that state, family, that is when you want to start praying and visualizing the things that you want to see happen because you want to impress these things upon your life force. So it is the frequency of the number of breaths that you utilize per minute that determines your state of awareness. Another way to address this is various trance states. The slower the breath, the deeper the trance state. The ultimate goal is transcendence, which is actually the end of our trance and for the awakening. Hence, transcendence. To escape the matrix means that we're out of the hypnotic trance that keeps us coming back here without being to ever elevate beyond here. Now, there's ancient teaching that say that you can come back after a while via choice. But the awakening begins when you have the full realization that you're connected, yet you can also experience your own individuality in a unique way because you're also aligned with your destiny. In the undifferentiated state, the nature of our innermost spirit gives us access to pure conscious awareness. It remains unconditioned in the world. So the world is ever transforming, but the spirit itself is unconditioned. The spirit itself, it does not go through conditions. Okay. The reason why is because it is who and what you actually are. It's beyond all these things. However, you get to have experience in the physical body, but in order to have these experiences and go through experiencing emotions like love, you know, intimacy, eating something, you have to have something that's opposite because that's how the universe works. It deals with friction. That's what keeps everything balanced. So you enjoy something, but then you discover that you have to do something in order to enjoy it. Some people call it sacrifice. In other words, you have to work. But there's a state that you can get to that you can transcend, even having to do that. So that's when you tap into the unconditioned part of you, which is your spirit, the highest aspect of your spirit, building up and breaking down, expanding and contracting, and so forth. This is what you go through in this universe because that's how the universe and all living things in physical forms operates. So the breath, the flow of one's thoughts, those go hand in hand. The mind, the all is mind, the universe is mental. The life force energy is directed with the breath, hence the Shekhem energy or the prana, the chi, ki, and so forth. This describes an energy source that exists within the air around us. So breath control can assist in the cutting down of invasive thoughts, and much of what creates challenges in our lives is directly connected to mind chatter. In Indian tradition, they call it chitta vritti. So you want to get rid of all the mind chatter. You have to transcend it, or you can learn how to ignore those thoughts too. But the power is being in the present. So worry, doubts, fears, which are evident in an imbalanced vagus nerve. It chips away with our power of nowness, aka presence. You got the past, the present, and the future, meaning they call the present or the present is the gift. Then you have the past, which is gone, and the future, which is yet to come. But when you get to that state of self awareness, you can integrate them into oneness, and you will discover that there's a simultaneity of past, present, and future. So its interpretation, the West African word for Ashe, it means command. It implies the power of presence. When you can command something, it's because you have a presence. If you're scattered because you haven't decided what you want to do, you lack presence. When they talk about Eshu giving you decisions, Eshu giving you decisions, you have to make a decision. Because when you make a choice and a decision and you integrate that choice and move full speed ahead, you can move full speed ahead whatever decision you make. But if you're scattered and foggy headed, it becomes hard to do, and therefore people become unsuccessful in life and they run into all kind of blockages. Also, we talk about high amounts of ashe. In the Congo, they call it mojo, shekam, chi, prana. It's the ability to have full awareness when we're being in the present moment. Because
Peace, everyone. Peace. I am Joy Allen of Karmic Dynasty, and today we are here with Khepra Ptah. He is discussing Amen Ra and the sacred breath, and he will be back in the studio shortly. For now, I am sharing the triple Hesi, which he mentioned earlier, and I shared it in brief earlier, but he moved along so fast that I just went ahead and took it out so as not to distract him. And I appreciate everyone that is here. I appreciate the feedback. And he is reconnecting. So he is actually here back in the studio. So we will resume at this time. Amen Ra and the sacred breath. And again, we appreciate everyone for being here and your patience. Dua Ustiba Khepra, if you would continue. Gratitude.
Dua. All right. Thank you. Sometimes we may run across a few technical challenges, technical difficulties, but all is well. Thank you for your patience. Um, Got to get back on my flow. We're talking about full awareness. So when we're scattered, we're not integrated, and we tend to function with a compromised energy field and an inability to manifest the things that we desire to see take place in our personal lives. So we want to be careful of dwelling too much on worry, anger, and even revenge thoughts. Okay? Because this is what the media does when they're constantly showing you all the things that remind you of being oppressed or remind you of cop killings and everything else. I'm not saying don't become active, but what I am saying is that what we would need to do is we need to put the energy into our lives where we can focus on the things that we want to see happen. You see, because what is happening is that because we've been stressed out at our jobs, we're seeing a lot of fear-based propaganda on in the media. In the media, it doesn't really have any profits off of telling people how many people went and saved grandma's cat out of a tree. They don't make a profit off of people being positive. They make a profit, they get viewing from people who are emotionally driven. And unfortunately, a lot of times they see that fear is the best way for them to get people's attention by keeping people in this realm of fear based thinking, you see. So we have to elevate beyond fear, but we have to transform our fears, false evidence appearing real, into motivation so that we can move forward in life. So through meditation, breath, and self awareness, we learn that we ascend the heights by grounding ourselves. And this is how we live our truth. In a Commission pantheon of deities, we see Ma'at kneeling, yet her arms and her wings are outstretched as if she is about to take flight. This very pose suggests that we sin, that we're basically connecting or we ascend the heights by grounding ourselves in truth. So when one lives truth, they see that it is necessary to reach that inner peace, and that inner peace results in a light heart that is in balance with the feather of truth, a heart that is devoid of heaviness and impurity, and balanced with the ostrich feather on the beams of the scales of Ma'at. Hence, we realize immortality with the balance of the mental body and the emotional body. When there is disruption in our mental and emotional body, dis-ease and other manifestations like accidents take place, in which we find our bodies being banged up, or our minds being traumatized. We also want to keep in mind that sound gives form to the light. The whole universe thrives on tones and frequencies and sound vibrations. So, if you can get the earlier cast where we talked about sound vibrations, this would actually be the sequel to that. Okay? The word universe meaning one song, one praise. Pythagoras, who had been a student of the Egyptian mystery school for 22 years, or Commission mysteries for 22 years, understood that the planets represented musical notes, hence the music of the spheres. The human voice makes musical notes in order to project the sound and hit those notes. There must be a coordination with the sacred breath. Hence, the priests of Kemet utilized hymns. So, in the Commission traditions, the lungs are governed by Hapi. It is the very important that we take care of our lungs. And in fact, when there is an imbalance of energy in the lungs, it is said that the person goes through depression. So, the depression is identified with an imbalance in the lungs. This is due to poor circulation of life force energy. So we can actually raise our vibration with the ability to sing. And another thing, if you want to utilize a way to clear the lungs, or that is remove depression, which is concentrated in the lungs, and replace that with thrive and motivation, then when you'll chant, now some say, and you focus on the color white around the lungs, or it could be either the snake or what I call the buzzing of the bees. So you hold your hands out, breathing in, breathing out. Then bring it over your lungs. Feel that vibration, feel that buzzing, feel that resonance in your ears and so forth. Let your whole body feel the energy as you resonate and vibrate, and you get that energy, that stagnant energy removed from your lungs so that you can remove that sense of depression, because nobody needs to be depressed. And you're in a constant state of depression, constant state of anxiety, and so forth. What ends up happening is that eventually you lose motivation to do anything. And then you fall into that state of apathy in which I'm talking about that only vibrates at 50. So, for those who are familiar with the spiritual systems of the East, you'll see that they talk about the chakras and how they're connected with deities and sound vibrations and seed sounds and so forth. You see, and it deals with the breath. You'll discover that these seed sounds are utilized with the breath. So you can also chant them like people talk about Om, which is hidden in the word Amun. It's the same sound vibration. When you chant Amun, Amun, you let it circulate throughout your whole body and just feel the energy because you want to feel it and get into that state, closing and sealing up holes in your aura and expanding your auric field. Also, purifying the blood and so forth. So it's good to drink water when you're doing these chants. It's good to eat a lot of green and alkaline. Okay? So the ancient Cometians understood that sound was produced through the lungs and the vocal cords, which is why we talked about earlier the lungs and the trachea being symbolized by Nefer. So the pharaoh or the Snesut Bedi, ancient Kemet, the king of Kemet, was the embodiment of the whole land and also the embodiment of Osar, but also he was a Haru. Haru Samai Tawi, Haru, the unifier of two lands, whose colors are red and white. So you can embody upper and lower Kemet, vice versa, by utilizing the sacred breath and making it so that your upper and higher self are working in harmony. But focus on getting this heart center because a lot of us are on survival mode. We're always told to be on survival mode. A lot of us, we have blocked heart centers. So therefore, we don't feel like we could. We can't be as soulful as we want to be. Okay? So we want to learn how to unblock this. So one of the ways to unblock the heart center is focusing on the ha breath and the ha chanting, which I mentioned earlier. Okay? You know, the Sanskrit, or should I see, when it comes to the chakras, you can chant yam. So you can say lam, bam, ram, yam. You focus on the center yam. Some are focused on green or some are focused on red. I say utilize red. It also corresponds with ha and ha. You could do it out loud. You can also do it in the form of the whisper. Breathing in. And I say utilize this method if you're going to do your prayers. And if you just want to chant ha, it's kind of like om, ooh, ah. These are all primordial sounds of relaxation to put you in that state of feeling better and feeling good because it's medicine. You see, if you're always stressed all the time, they're always talking about African Americans are susceptible to heart disease and heart attacks, all the stress related illnesses. We want to remove that so we can live a good life. You see what I mean? Despite all the crap that they're continuing to show us, and I'm not saying we're not, having to deal with racism and all that, and or coming from a downtrodden level, but I'm saying that we can rise above it, family. We have the ability to do that because showing and proving that you're great, you have the potential to overcome your obstacles by being Haru or the embodiment of Haru and Het Haru. Het Haru. So when we examine the symbols used by the ancient Cometians, we see the depiction of Haru, the spirit of order, and the spirit of Set, which is chaos, tying the ropes around the lungs and trachea and planting it into the land. Remember, we talked about feeding the earth that's still utilized in West African tradition. So you want to ground yourself, feed the land. One way you can actually do this when you're gardening. You see what I mean? Having a connection with the earth, literally connection with the earth. Some people actually find it therapeutic to start a garden and grow plants from the ground. You're literally connecting with the earth and you're also creating an energetic connection with the work that you're doing with the spirit of the food that you're planting. So we examine these particular ways of life. We see that people in certain areas on the planet, they seem to be even happier than a lot of people who are around a whole bunch of lavish things because they have that connection. Okay? So when I traveled throughout the East, when I was in the military, I discovered that there were families that didn't seem to have half of the stuff we have over here, and they seem to have been happier. You see, what is it about us with all this technology where you got 5,000 friends on your friends list and you're still not happy? Why is it that so many people feel alone? Because there's no real intimate human connection. There's no real interaction among people these days. So when you interact with actual people, You also will discover that you feel a little bit better when you're interacting with more people, especially for those who feel that they have no one to turn to. Over 10 or 20 years ago, it said that the average person felt that they had 5 people to turn to. Now understand, the average person feel like they don't have anyone to turn to. How is this possible? When you have your phones, you can just go ahead and get on social media and get a whole bunch of people you don't know as your friends, right? You see? So it's good for us to have an interaction. Sometimes it's good to connect with people, you see? Now, of course, there's those who would like to rather be the monk and meditate on the mountain. You could do that. You see what I mean? But we still have that primordial part of us that's connected all the way back to the time when we traveled in groups. A lot of us do things because we want to stay in connection with the group, and that's why a lot of people adhere to popular opinion. So there's that aspect of that love in which we seek. You first want to find it within yourself, okay? Because if you don't have that energy circulating within yourself, as far as having self love, you're not going to really find it easy at all to work around other people or connect with people. If you want to have an economy, you have to connect with people. I constantly hear us talking about how we need to build economically and so forth. We need to be able to connect with people. Okay. So anyway, I don't want to get into preaching, but getting back to what we were talking about, Smai Tawi, we're talking about the unification of the two lands. It's about the unification that brought and restores Ma'at. It brought Ma'at together, the balance, truth, and harmony. The land outside of us represents the objective realm, just as we have the inner realm, which is known as the subjective realm. The ancient Cometians understood this, so they knew about the law of correspondence, which is as above, so below, and it worked in regards of as within, so without. So you want to make sure that there's a connection between the subjective realm and the objective realm. When you are able to do things objectively, it's affecting the subjective. When you're doing things subjectively, you can affect the objective. But you want to have a relationship with your inner and outer environment. So just as the land is unified with the lungs and the trachea, bringing order to the land, it is our own works with the lungs and trachea that brings order to our body temple. The power of breathing brings stability to the mind, and this in turn brings harmony to the low, high, and middle self. And with the proper breath, we circulate. We unite the two hemispheres of the brain. So we're both human and divine. We are spiritualized matter that composes our body. We have the spiritualized matter that composes our body. That's where the alchemy comes in. We activate the coup, and then we can actually transform and transmute our own being into a higher level, higher vibration. So with observation, we see that there's different temples. They had special acoustics in stone, and they were engineered for the utilization of the human voice. And there are challenges that we have been living through, where we want to strive to further decipher the written language that is now called Medu Neter. The code has been cracked, family. There's been many people that's on it, many of our ancestors. They wanted us to understand what they had left in the Nile Valley. They put those hieroglyphs, those Medu Neter, they chiseled them into the walls, and they did it so good that modern people are wondering how they did it. Okay? They left those monuments for us, family. So the more progress is made in figuring out the proper tones, even though there's the basic understanding of the sounds, there's also the structures of how molecules can be rearranged with sound. You might want to look and see about experimentations with sound and how you can get geometric patterns by vibrating sound in various fragmentations of sand and how they take geometrical shapes because it's talking about how creation is taking shape. Even though there's a basic understanding of the structures of sounds and language, we want to be able to understand how you can utilize your own sound and find your own inner sound. Go into meditation and find a sound that you resonate with. So we look into ancient traditions and all the way today. There's the utilization of Coptic. It is understood that the Coptic language, though native to Kemet, was also a language that came later. Okay, people are still trying to utilize Coptic to understand the ancient Cometian language, but also study those languages around various parts of Africa, like in the Congo and the Bantu and so forth. You want to get these languages because some of these languages probably give you a good idea of what a lot of these words may not have only sounded, but other meanings that may not have been translated by the Egyptologists and so forth. So anyway, more on this later. No doubt that the Kemetic influence, you can see that carried out on the Hebrew traditions. We also see where Tara, which was also a deity, there was a song for Tara that was utilized in the East. Some say that Om is connected to the goddess Tara, but that was the deity that came from the Dravidians. We'll see that when you look into the Hindu tradition, they have what is called the Bhagavad Gita. It means the song of the divine. We see that the Holy Quran in Islam is people learn how to sing the Quran, right? And you have to be trained to sing the Quran a certain way so that you get the tones and frequencies right, so that you can go into a certain trance. Okay, all of this it's still alive. It's just alive in various religions today. Okay, in Islamic tradition also, like I said, you have to be trained. A lot of people don't even know what they're saying when they recite the Quran. All they know is the sounds because it's written in an ancient language of the Quraysh people. But more on this later. But the reason why you learn how to sing in these ancient texts is because you're trying to reach those very states that they're talking about, those seven heavens and those different states that they're talking about within these texts. Seven heavens, seven planets. In the Hindu tradition, they call them lokas. They're still talking about seven levels of being and so forth. In Kemet, there was the seven Aritu that the initiate would pass through and so forth. So what's interesting is not only sound is capable of having us change our state of mind or shift the other levels of consciousness, trance states. Say the parrot the sounds. They parrot the sounds. They don't know what they're saying. Exactly. In fact, Karmic Dynasty makes a real good point. When I was actually in Iraq, I was trying to get the Iraqis to tell me what the Quran actually meant. They knew how to sing the Quran, but when I asked them, well, could you translate it into English? They actually said that they did not know how to translate it because it can't be translated. So the more I talked to them, I found out when I talked to an Iraqi Christian that she understood how to speak the Iraqi language and she understood Arabic. And she said she read the Quran. She tried to read the Quran. She says she knows how to make the sounds, but it doesn't make sense to her. So you're definitely correct on that. Okay. A lot of people are utilizing books and texts and they don't know the original meaning. And this is why you have to be trained. It was a apprenticeship, with student and master, or student and adept and so forth, where they'll train you how to do these things to reach certain state, because you'll discover that all the laws in these texts, including the rabbinical literature, the laws in these texts say one thing, but that is for the people who have not been initiated into higher mysteries. You actually get the benefits when you learn the language and you're learning not only what you're chanting, but you learn the tones and frequencies that these texts are composed of, you see. So anyway, I want to talk about something else too. Sound can also be used to shift your personality. For the broken down, you have persona, right? Per meaning through, sona sound. The personality is the mask we wear as an identity. Now, Hermetic traditions maintain that to change your mood, you change your vibration. So the highest level of our spirit is undifferentiated. So you want to work with abdominal breathing and put yourself in that trance state. We talked about the and Ra breath. That's one way, right? Or Om. A lot of people who chant these things, the personality will actually change after a while as their consciousness expands, you see. Because all these different aspects of the personality, well, what is the personality? If you go through a traumatic event and you have your personality shattered, there's a lady named Sybil. There was a book written about her. She had 16 personalities because all the various traumas that she went through. But if your personality can be shattered into 16 pieces, right, or split in two or split into three, then that means that the personality is not actually you. The personality represents a vibration or a frequency in which you're on. And you can change that. You can transform that. You see, you can go into different trance states and change that. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you can cheat your destiny, but how you respond to certain circumstances when you come across them. So when our breath is obstructed, our lives become obstructed too. You read there's a Dogon. I'm trying to think. I think it was Conversations with Ogotamili. Either his literature, but it was Dogon literature I looked at years ago, and it talks about how people can be thrown off by using the wrong types of words. They identify, interesting enough, the word with not only the word with normal, but also with water with normal. So normal is water. We see in a Commission tradition, the waters of creation represent the energetic field in which we're all a part. And then there's the words. So we talked about Ra representing the arm, the second cubit, and we also talked about the mouth. That is the fish's mouth because you're speaking to the waters of creation. By the way, you know we're actually underwater because you need water in order for sound. This is water molecules in the air. So when we're speaking, the sound is actually vibrating off these water molecules. See, so we're actually still in the water. We're just under sublimated water. That's all. So you never actually get away from the sea. You never actually get away from the waters of life. So when you have a chance, especially when it's nice and cold outside, it's cool. If it's too cold, you need to drink water, as well as if it's too hot. You don't want to dehydrate. Anyway, when our breath is obstructed, our lives are obstructed too. You get traumas, poor posture, there's pollution. All this represent the stagnant waters within the body. Okay, when we breathe correctly, it'll be noticed that you will feel a whole lot more alive. It's good to drink water along with the breath. It's good to drink water. A lot of us don't drink water. We act like water is nasty, but it's good to drink water. It's good because we don't want energy to be too stagnant in our body, and we do not want the waters within our bodies to be too stagnant. There's a book, and I can't remember the author's name, but he had a book called The Body's Many Cries for Water. So it might be a good book to read. I read it years ago, and it had a lot of good things to say. See, water also carries memory. So when you drink, if you're going to drink water, you can do what I learned from the Temple of the White and Gold Lotus. And you say, you put your hands up like this and you look through and you see a golden ankh in a container of water. You say, Af Hasim Amin Ra Nu Jehudi Munecher. And speak the metal nectar into, and then you're sending your intention into the water. You're basically saying that you would like to bring energy of peace into the water of the still heart, and you're paying homage to Tahuti, and you're paying homage to the divine within you, and you're about to bring this energy within you. You're about to bring the water with the good intention to heal your body within you. Thank you for that. Ferdun Batman Giedi, if I'm saying that correct. Yeah, Saha, the body's many cries for water. Thank you. I appreciate that, Karmic Dynasty. So it must be noted that due to incorrect breathing, a major segment of the population is continuing to go through high levels of anxiety, depression, other illnesses, and it's because, once again, the incorrect breathing. And it seems to be prominent in the West. People are sick, they're low on energy, and so forth. This causes people to be on the edge physically and mentally. And it's known that the West people in the West, they suffer from mental illnesses in disproportionate numbers. And many of us have learned that the unfortunate practice of the breathing from the chest and not the abdomen is one of the main causes of stagnation in our bodies. So in the area of the abdomen is the solar plexus. When you're breathing to the abdomen, you're connecting with the solar energy. By the way, for those who are into Eastern metaphysics, you will discover that the sound here for this chakra happens to be Ra. Okay? So this is the location of the Manipura chakra, the center of the personal will and a sense of self and boundaries. Interesting enough, we talk about Ra, Ram, or Ram, bringing strength to one's body. Ra is called Ankh Ucha Seneb. Ra is called the Prince Ankh Ucha Seneb, which means life, strength, and vitality. See, so this is the site of solarization. This is why we call it the solar plexus, because you're connected with the sun right here. So when breathing from the lower diaphragm, you gain a lot of benefits. Number one, it activates the abdominal brain, okay, which I say would be an Oriental here, okay. When someone feeds the Ori, they're also feeding energy in the belly button because you're connected with that energy. It activates the vagus nerve. and it oxygenates the whole entire body. So abdominal breathing, it brings awareness to the power storehouse 2 inches below the belly button. So we look into the Amun-Ra factor, we can see this fully expressed. And it's through the utilization of the abdominal breathing. Let's look at the hieroglyphics one more time. Once again, we talk about Amun. It starts with the reed leaf or the double reed leaf. We see the air element. And it's believed that the air contains a spiritual substance received in the form of the sacred breath. Next, we have the Senate board representing the automatic function of our being. We got the spirit that animates everything to the water element. The spirit elevates our being and it's evident via the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And there are two components that make up the autonomic system, right? The sympathetic nervous system, along with the parasympathetic nervous system, they bear witness that what is keeping us alive and functioning goes beyond our conscious awareness. The name also contains water waves. So we know that water symbolizes many things. Earlier, we talked about how water is symbolic to the energy field because we're also in a sea of energy, right? So you got two things going on here. You got the sea of energy that surrounds us, and you also got the little water molecules, which allows us to be able to speak and breathe and everything else in order for things to be heard because sound does not travel in a vacuum. It is actually vibrating off of something, and it's vibrating off the water molecules. So in the Congo, it talks about the Kalunga. It talks about, in Yoruba, it talks about Olokun. Well, guess what? We're talking about the ocean. But here's the thing you are not out of the ocean. Okay? So water is vital, sound is vital, breath is vital. So the sacred breath also aids in the digestive system, not to mention water stores memory. Okay? It is working with this, Amun, within water that flows the power of Ra. Water is the conductor of electricity that energizes the life force within each and every one of us. So we look at Ra, we see the mouth of the fish, and next we see the outstretched arm. And even though these are sounds, there's suggestion that the power of sound transmit and receive, which is why the arms outstretched and the hand that is turned upward, indicating it can give and receive. So you have to give yourself permission to receive. Air, yes, air. You can say that air does have memory in a way too, because the water molecules is traveling through the air, but you also pick up on the ethers. You're picking on vibrations to the air, and you're picking on information that was long ago, just as you're picking up on radio waves. See, the universe actually, I could say, is full of memories. Okay? Even with the division of cells and everything else, things that happened long ago, it's still recorded. It still has left an imprint in the universe. This is why psychics can pick up on things that may have happened when somebody was murdered and so forth. They can actually pick up on the energy left behind and the memories around that. A lot of times, when you see a ghost, for instance, that ghost may not necessarily be alive. It may not be conscious. You're just simply seeing the memory of something within the ethers. You're seeing the memory over and over and over again. I'm being, people that see ghost ships and ghost cars, even. Cars don't have spirits, but something could have happened in that particular time and place where you're seeing memory that's being played over and over again. And sometimes we pick up on these memories, which is why when you enter certain rooms where something violent may have happened, or if there is an argument, you will feel the energy. No matter if you walked into a house when there was a couple who are acting like they're cool, but they may have just gotten a fight, right? But they're not showing it, but you're still picking up on the vibration of the fact that the argument took place. Not only is this in the walls, but it's also in the air. Okay. But water is a great conductor of electricity and is a conductor of flow. So if let's say you're dealing with homeopathy, what you'll do is that you'll take the plants of a certain herb and so forth, or the herb from a certain plant, pardon me, and you can put that in the water and you can remove the herb and it will still have the memory of the herb in the water. And you can actually drink that water and be in tune with the vibration of that particular herb and even be cured from certain illnesses and diseases and so forth. See, so whenever something is heated, right, it expands. We're talking about contraction, expansion, contraction, and so forth. When something is heated, it expands. When it freezes, it contracts. When something moves, it heats up, and then it slows down, it cools off. So the internal fire of Ra deals with the ability to expand as well as contract. The icon of Ra, I mentioned earlier, is the dot within a circle, also representing the solar disk, representing a point, and from that point, it's expansion or creation. So the dot within the circle represents the ripple effect taking place in the cosmic waters of creation. So it's like a stone being thrown into a water and the ripples expanding outwards. This is how energy is radiated from a single source. This is how energy is radiated from a single source. Whatever you do leaves ripple effects in the universe. Okay? This is how the universe came into existence. So the abdomen, trumped by the solar plexus, is the location of the abdominal brain. Greeting system. This is under the heart behind the stomach. It involves every organ in the abdomen: abbot, servant, omen, auspicious. So you might could say that the abdomen is the servant of that which is auspicious or auspicious signs. Because if you're breathing and if you are one with your abdominal brain, you'll be able to pick up on things around you. Every element has its own. Now fire, here's the thing. What fire does for us is that it also generates the life force. Now, in my studies, I myself have not necessarily seen the fire, the flame, as far as containing memory, but I do know that fire has to do with the expansion of consciousness, you see. So fire has a lot to do with helping things expand and so forth. In fact, you need it to digest your food, okay? Ghosts are spirits that could not go through the megasphere of the earth. It is because vibrations, frequencies, energies weren't fast enough to go through the megasphere, so they came back to earth. In the form of spiritism and espiritismo, there's that, you could talk about the Ba, which is the part of you that is eternal and so forth. But there's also a part of you that stays behind. Now, there's a part of you that stays behind, which is called the astral shell. And a lot of times people can pick up on an astral shell, but the person have moved on. But it's the astral shell that was left behind. So you can pick up on the astral shell of a person, and you may pick up on all the worst of this person's personality and emotions and so forth. And a lot of times you want that energy to dissipate. But there's a lot of things, I like your explanation of a ghost, and I definitely will want to look more into that. But my understanding is that there's quite a few things that make ghosts and phantoms. So you're in a universe that have to contain a whole lot of different things. Those have also died in traumatic situations, right? There's that aspect where you have the actual spirit of a person that's caught in a time loop, where they experience the same thing over and over again. There's that theory and so forth, you see. So thank you for that. I will definitely look more into that, okay? The abdomen or the gut is where we feel a sense of danger, okay? So the solar plexus has nerves that radiate directly to all organs in connection with the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that connects all the organs in the body. And when the vagus nerve is disturbed, the individual will experience anxiety and disharmony between the cerebral and abdominal brain. So this also deals with the solar and the lunar currents in the body. So we talked about the Pingala and the Ida, and we also talked about the middle point, the Sushumna. This is your central core. So when the stomach is cold and the head is hot, this indicates that there's a disruption in your central core, and we have identified that as your personal Djed pillar. So the Djed pillar is the backbone of Asar and Ptah. So both identify with the sacred bull, representing vitality. So the techniques in which we will work on here is first we're going to deal with the pot belly breathing, where you utilize this with the higher aspect we talked about earlier. First, you need everyone to sit straight. You want your palms on your knees, okay? Can't really see the way I'm sitting here. When you start, put your palms on your knees, and you're going to breathe in. Breathing in, remember we talked about Necharankamara, Nutatiradamara, Nukamara. So you breathe in silently. Now some would breathe in. If you don't want to do a chant, you can just count to 4. Breathing out, counting to 4. and then you hold it counting to 4. You're breathing in counting to 4, and then you count, then you hold it counting to 4. See, then in 4 cycles of 4. All right. So, if anybody have any questions, any comments, feel free. Okay, when you go into trance, okay. Now there's a such thing as ancestral communication. When we are in contact with their ancestors, a lot of times they come to us in dreams. So one method of connecting with the ancestors is that you would remember we talked about water, okay? What I've learned is that you utilize water, and you can put that on a place, a sacred place, like for instance what I have behind me. Hold on. I utilize water. Khepra, we'll talk about utilizing 7 cups of water and so forth. So I utilize the water, and I change the water every week. You're going to change the water every week so that the waters do not become stagnant. Okay? Burn a candle and so forth, and you call upon the names of your ancestors. Now remember, we had talked about how DNA is voice activated, where you're calling upon the names of your ancestors, and you're also reactivating those memories of who your ancestors are, because your ancestors are also within you, you see. Say next to your bed. Yes. So I have mines down here too. You know, you can't really see my bed because I actually have it as flat. But at the same time, you know, when you connect with your ancestors, you're also going to notice too that connecting with your ancestors, you want to make sure that you're breaking ancestral patterns that you may not want to repeat in your life, okay? Or the things in which you want to utilize. Oh, yes, the glass of water next to the bed. Got you. Okay. Now, one time I used to have a lot of interesting dreams, and I remember that I would learn from elders to put a glass of water next to your bed or next to the head of your bed so that you would not have those nightmares. And it seemed to have worked for me because I captured the negative energies of whatever was going on in the house. But when it comes to the ancestors, also, you can have like 9 glasses of water, and those 9 can represent ancestors which you want to communicate with. Okay. Is that the reason why DNA carries 14 generations of memory? You know, that's interesting because the Yoruba will say that it carries 16 generations of memory. They say that you know who you are if you can call your ancestors back 16 generations. But I've also seen where people have made that connection to the 14 pieces of Asar, representing the 7 generations on your mother's side and 7 generations on your father's side. So I've heard people talk about that. There seem to be a few different schools of thought around that, about how that works. But what you do want to do, if you don't have the names of your ancestors, if you can't remember them all, you can call upon the attributes of your ancestors and how they may have died. And what I discovered is that just by doing that, information came to me about who my actual ancestors are. And I discovered that I had some pretty interesting ancestors, you know, who were descendants of the Edway Fine in New Orleans. So they'll come to you in dreams and they'll direct you to where you need to go to find out who your ancestors are. There was something that I didn't talk about too. We had talked about those power centers. Now, when you're chatting, what you can also do is you want to breathe into the 7 centers and utilize the breath. You know, now some will identify the chakras with colors, and I'm gonna tell you what I've learned from people who actually deal with the system in India. They tell you that that rainbow scheme of the chakras is something new, and I believe that the rainbow colors is something that came out of the New Age movement or those connecting with theosophy. In India, at one point in time, did not recognize the rainbow colors of the chakras, but I'm not saying don't utilize them because I've utilized these colors myself. But if, for instance, you want to connect with the solar plexus chakra, then you breathe in yellow. right? Or if you want to connect with the root chakra, you breathe in red. You chant Lam. If you want to connect with the creative chakra or reproductive chakra, then it's orange. Manipura, which is the solar plexus, we talked about that being yellow, which happens to be Ra. The heart, the color is green or red, which happens to be Yam. Yam. The throat, its color is blue, which happens to be Ham. And then you have this area. Some would say Om and some would say Saham, depending on your school of thought, where they'll say that this is purple, and I've heard some people say that this is indigo, and some would say that this higher chakra is pure white or gold, and they'll say that this chakra is either Aum or some would say it's silent. Depends on your school of thought, right? Some believe that the supreme peace is absolute silence. But when you chant these sounds, focus on the colors that work for you. You see, some people identify the color green and they may breathe in the color green because they're talking about money. But in some traditions, depending on where you're at, they don't utilize green if they're trying to accumulate wealth. They'll breathe in the color gold and they'll burn gold candles and they'll breathe in those colors instead to bring forth wealth. So a lot of it has to do with world view and intention. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up, family. You know, oh yeah, oh yeah. The rainbow chakra system is new. It's a more of a recent innovation. It's not something that goes back thousands of years, according to those who are those are people who actually practice the system in India. And in fact, all those chakras are connected to the deities to get you in a trance state to connect with those particular deities and so forth. Okay, so family, it was great talking to you. We're gonna wrap this up, and hopefully we can see you next Thursday. And I'd like to get a little bit more into the sacred waters of creation. Until then, family, you have a beautiful night. Uncle Chastaneb, Hatapu.